Let me see. Oh, okay. So we're recording now. Okay. So welcome to another edition of eTalks. My name is Tommy Mack. I'll be the host today, and I'll be talking to two of our esteemed deputy division chiefs about what it's like to be a division chief. So let's just go ahead and get started. I'll ask you all to introduce yourselves, tell us where you work, and we'll go from there. Doug, I'll start with you since you are the elder statesman in the group.
Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate that. So my name is Douglas Willard, Doug, and I work in the labs, NEL. I'm the deputy division chief for the labs, and I've been out here for, as Tommy pointed out, been out here for quite a long time and worked in and around the labs in the design area for, oh goodness, 30-something years, 31 or 2 years, something like
that. Okay, thank you, Doug. Edsel?
What is that saying? Age before beauty? Hey, thanks again for doing this, Tommy. And this is a very good thing. Edsel Sanchez, and I've been out here for 17 years. Wow, 17 years. And started my career in the shuttle organization, working electrical. And from there, went to CFF, construction of facilities, went to the EGS program, and now in engineering. That's my background.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Edsel, let's start with you. Let's talk about your roles and responsibilities as a division chief and how they differ from the chief of the office.
Yeah, sure. And there's two things, primary roles and the responsibility. Mainly as the deputy division chief, ensuring the division meets commitments, providing the guidance and leadership to the division and the leaders within the division. How does that role differ from what is the actual division chief, me being a deputy? A lot of it, it's strategy. A lot of it is divide and conquer. Usually the division chief will take on, a couple of the areas, and the deputy, myself in this case, would take on other areas. It just depends what that functional area is. Sometimes together we'll be conquering as opposed to divide and conquer. Usually it's a time constraint, when it comes to play. Other times it's given our backgrounds or understanding with the subject, we'll divide and conquer. But for the most part, we're tied at the hip, and we brief each other constantly on a day-to-day basis. But that's my roles and responsibility.
What about you, Doug?
Well, it's similar in that we play on our strengths, and there is some of the divide and conquer. Sometimes there's natural divisions that one of us or the other would take a lead on something, but you do need to be, as Edsel said, tied at the hip. You need to be in sync, and when you aren't in sync, then that can be a problem. So we try our very best to be in sync. And also being mindful that Scott Murray, in my case, is the division chief, and there are some cases where there's going to be division of labor, and sometimes it just makes sense, just logistically, that you have to split up the work because you have to get the work done. And also, as my role being, I will often provide guidance or just a sounding board sometimes, just to bounce ideas off of. So Scott will have a position, and if you're out in front and you're leading, that's where you're supposed to be. But there's a definite need to have somebody that either has a different perspective or at least has an outside, can be looking at it from a different angle. It provides just a better product. So some of my role is just being a sounding board and to give ideas or giving different perspectives. That can be very valuable, not just as a deputy. I mean, that's very valuable in general. And that is part of the job. I don't know if you agree with that, Edsel, if you
Yeah.
experience, but it's,
definitely.
it's not really written down in the duties, but it's very important to flesh out the ideas before you roll out a policy or something. You need to look at it pretty thoroughly. And so that's I do a good bit of that.
Oh, you're muted, Tommy. Sorry.
You're muted, Tommy.
Thank you.
There you go.
So Doug, pulling on that a little bit, dividing and conquering, do you see your role more as a technical person or a managerial person or a combination thereof?
So that's a really good question. I actually get to ask. I've been asked in different forms that same question. I come from a technical background, I should mention. Most people that know me would consider me to be a technical person. We've tried it in two different modes, Scott and I have, and I think that being closer tied to the hip works better most of the time. We need to be in sync more than dividing and conquering, because dividing and conquering, there's a risk in that you're going to get out of sync, and you don't want to have the message be out of sync. That there's a danger in that. So you don't want to be out of sync. There are some things that by nature of myself and Scott, we both would be considered technical, I think, and that naturally when it comes to things, my background is in research and physics and on the design side. So whenever those sorts of issues come up, I'm going to step forward and do that. I think it's probably a good use of skills. But I think now that I've been in the role for a little while, I do probably less technical than I would have done. And just to speak plainly, since we're sitting around here just talking, not going into the technical details was a challenge for me. And I don't know if this is kind of getting off of the exact thing, but for me personally, I have a tendency to go into great details. I want to know all the things. I'm extremely curious, and I want to know every single little thing about it. And that's something that I've had to, I've wrestled with, especially early on. It's not necessarily in my nature to not do that, but I discovered that at some point you have to say, okay, I have enough information to synthesize a position and have a direction forward, and the next thing's going to be coming, and that's going to be good enough, and I'm going to have to resist the urge to sit there and read the paper, read whatever paper it happens to be for the next 5 hours, which I would love to do. I mean, that would, but that isn't part of the job. So you have to realize that. And I don't know, but that's something that I struggled with coming from I think by most people's measure, a purely technical person. That was something that I had to work on.
Yeah.
So I take it your preference is, or you lean more towards the technical aspects of the job?
I naturally would do that.
Yes.
But I will say that maybe I don't know. I'd like to think that I've grown to appreciate what I wasn't good at. I had to actively work at what I'm not good at. I tend to work on my weaknesses. I guess that's not always the approach. That's what I do. And so you sit there, you do a little self-reflection. You figure, okay, well, what am I not good at? Okay, let's be realistic here. You're not going to lie to yourself, and let's do something, toward improving what you're not good at. And you actively do that. Like, write it down. I tend to, if I write it down, if I can crystallize it in words on the written page, and I don't mean typing it, I like to actually write it down, showing my age. It helps me to crystallize what the plan forward is. That's me personally. And then I explicitly look at that list and go, okay, this is how I'm going to address these things. I've done that, literally did that. So, yeah, do I always want to do technical? Not always, but do I tend to do that? Absolutely. And so I have to be aware of that.
What about you, Edsel? Edsel, more technical or managerial? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I would say because this job is definitely a combo, but it's mostly in my area. It's mostly managerial. As engineers, naturally we want to be more in the technical, but there's still components of that in the managerial side. So to answer, my preference is the managerial. I like the leadership aspect. I like to treat leadership as a discipline, no different than any discipline. The strategies behind it, how to get work situations accomplished. When you have an engineering problem, you want to solve it. When you have a leadership problem, you solve it by various means. The thought process that's required, working with the folks, the people. I really enjoy that part of this job. So yeah, it's the leadership aspect.
Okay. So let's talk about something that you guys mentioned earlier, which was playing the role of a sounding board for your division chiefs. Usually, or sometimes in that role, the person who is playing the sounding board has different thoughts, different ideas, may not agree at all with the chief, or may completely agree. When you agree, there's no issue. Give me a little perspective on how you, if you do have other thoughts or thoughts that are different from your chief, what is your approach to that? How do you deal with that? And so I'll start with you.
Okay. So I think there's every position, you will face with some form of disagreement. And I think, it goes back to the influential techniques and how that comes into play. Usually, when there's a disagreement, it's going to be, your need as the deputy division chief versus the division chief's need. And there's some form, we can't come to terms with that, right? So sometimes the answer could be, hey, we both agree to disagree. But I rather, and for the most part, it hasn't been that way. I rather come to a term and see how we can, because we both have the same mission. This role, the deputy division chief and the division chief, we have an aligned or combined motive. So I think, and I'll quote Henry Ford, if there's one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that other person's angle. If you understand the need, I'll give you an example. Recently, I had a work product and there was a disagreement on the schedule. The chief wanted it a certain date, but I wanted to push back and say, hey, I believe that it should be pushed for another week. There was a disagreement about that, but ultimately, I know the needs of the chief. Wants to make sure that we have an A+ product to go in front of our directors. So, rather than try to understand what the need is, that was the need. And so I communicated, hey, if you follow this strategy and allow for more time, there's going to be a higher likelihood that we're going to get an A+ product as opposed to maybe a C or B type product. And at the end, we were able to compromise somewhere in the middle, knowing, but it took understanding of the needs from both sides. And usually that 9 out of 10 times in the disagreements, I'm not saying it happens, very, very often, but when it does happen, it's human nature. It's just finding that that balance. What are the needs of the person? The with them. What's in it for me? What's in it? What's in it for both sides? And try to come to a happy medium to meet that objective. That I found that strategy of understanding the other side has helped in being able to diffuse some disagreements, or when we come to these sounding boards, and hey, I recommend this strategy. Well, I don't agree. There's it's all about communication. I think.
So, Edsel, do you ever have any reservations about voicing a dissenting opinion to your chief?
No, I feel that best teams that would go forward is one that's highly vocal and communicate, and that was the expectation from day one from both sides. And in this position is very critical that that nobody holds anything back, because it's a big mission, and it's a lot of people that you're leading. A division of 143 plus folks. So that is very important. That open communication is key.
Looks like we may have lost Edsel there.
Very nice. He was on a good roll too.
Well, this is technology.
This is technology. I could jump in and keep on going if you want,
please, Doug.
Okay, cool.
So, hey, sorry about that. I had an issue with my internet.
No problem.
Okay. It's all you, man.
What was your question, or when did I drop off?
My question was, do you ever have any reservation about pushing back on your chief? And I think the answer was no. And I think you expressed that the importance of doing that, and the importance of having that open and honest communication with your superior. Doug, let me go to you. I'm going to flip that around a little bit. Let's say that you have an employee that comes to you, and you're asking that employee to do something, or you're challenging something that employee is presenting to you, and the employee pushes back on that. How do you deal with that? What is your approach to that? Is that something that you recommend?
Recommend to push back?
Yes.
Or so a lot of these things are situational, but I'll just take the hypothetical general case. So when somebody's bringing something that I don't necessarily agree with, I tend to, and it's not the only strategy, but I find that it works, is that I tend to not overanalyze it, but I like to get data. I need to understand. I need to fully understand the perspective, not simply the statement that is brought to me, but maybe the larger or broader context within which this perspective is being brought to me. I need to understand the position and the perspective of that particular position. So I do a lot of data. I need to find data. And then I start conversations. I always find that most situations, most really bad situations, there's probably people that write books on this, come down to bad communication or lack of communication or some default, communication problem. So I try to understand it and communicate so I can fully get it. Even if I don't understand it, I was like, okay, I will try to quantify and get my arms around that problem. And if it's an honest misunderstanding, I usually try to communicate, well, this is my position, this is where I'm coming from. So at least both parties are going to see, hopefully as best as we can, the other person's perspective and the other people's ideas. In the end, we do have a structure. And likewise, like Edsel, so I'm an advisor, and I can give my position, and I have I think there's a mutual respect between myself and Scott. I value his advice, and likewise, I think he values mine. And so we do have an open, very, very open. If there's any issues, we're going to bring it up. I like to think that I have that same relationship with anybody on the team, regardless of the hierarchy. But in the end, if you're asking, hey, when it's a binary, it has to go one way or the other, up or down, left or right. There's got to be a call. Then at some point, you get paid to make that call, or somebody gets paid to make that call, and they have to make that call. And when the decision is made, and this is me personally, I go, okay, I understand it. We've communicated about it. I may not even agree with it, but once the decision is made, okay, that's the decision. I'm going in that direction. That's me personally, and I hope that that's a relationship that I have with with my dogs. All right. Okay. God. Hold on. Sorry. So that's my approach. I try to understand. I try to get perspective. You make a call and you move forward. I don't want to damage any relationships or anything like that, so I try not to do that. But we are here to work, and so sometimes you do have to make a call that not everybody agrees with. So you try to make sure that everybody at least understands.
Has an employee ever successfully changed your mind about something?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm in the job and I listen to a lot of people and I got a lot of data, but like Edsel will say, I can't know the subtleties or the nuance of all issues. And without a doubt, there can be situations where I don't have all the data, or I have a bias based on a previous 1 or 2 data points. Well, there's a big world out there. Just because I handled it right this one way, this one time, I'm not omniscient. I don't know everything. So when I ask for data, I tend to ask for data no matter what. I like data. So if somebody brings me a position and can explain it and articulate it, and I understand where they're coming from, I will often go with that position. There's an overall. I think there's an overall philosophic approach that leaders bring that provide, hey, this is the direction we're going in, and assuming that it falls somewhere within that structure, then why wouldn't you? Why would you? I guess I have a point of view of, if I got 120 people's perspective, why wouldn't I leverage that? I mean, it just makes to me, that makes complete sense. But maybe not everybody agrees with that.
Got you. So, Doug, what led you to pursue the position that you're in today?
So the position that I'm in today, which is in the labs, I looked at it, having grown up in the labs, having done a lot of work in and around labs and with lab folks. I have a great appreciation for that work. I like that area. So I'm naturally inclined to gravitate toward that. And after a period of time, after a certain amount of years, I looked around and thought, hey, I can affect change. And that's when I went, my first step outside of pure technical to technical / leadership. That's how I made the transition. I was a leader. I was a technical leader. I was a leader in the labs, but a formal leadership role. I saw that I could affect perhaps even a greater change in a larger sphere of influence over not just my work, but perhaps a philosophic position over a bunch of work. I thought there would be benefit. I could help the organization and I could help the agency in a bigger way. And just to speak, just between us girls, I thought I would never have considered that in the first half of my career. I was technical and that's what I was going to be. But after I saw just a glimpse of what influence you can have on the broader audience. So now you can, you can help other designers and other scientists accomplish the goals of bigger missions. It opened my eyes to management, despite what I may have thought earlier in my career. Is there's actually a good manager worth his weight in gold. I mean, I believe that. A good leader, I should say, and I make the distinction between leaders and managers. And so when I saw that, it opened my eyes. I thought, hey, this is. I think I can help in here. And so I pursued after that more leadership roles and ever large, bigger influences. So when I saw this as an opportunity, I thought an entire division of the labs, I believe that I can contribute some of my experience to some of the techniques and the approaches that I have had success with. I think that I can help out in that way. So when it became an opportunity, to me, it was a very natural fit. I gravitated toward it, and I thought, hey, I know I can do this, and I think I can really affect positive change here. So that's how I got here.
So, Doug, if you had to name one or two skills or experience that you have that help you most in this job, what would they be?
Skills. So I'm going to list a couple of skills, not necessarily I'm naturally good at, but I have developed and become better at, and that has made me better. And we kind of touched on it before, but as a younger man, I was fairly sure of myself.
Just when you were younger?
Yes, Tommy, thank you. For those of you who don't know, Tommy and I go way back, so yes. I was extremely sure of myself. That's a nice way of saying that I didn't seek out the other perspective. I didn't seek that out. I didn't from a technical point, possibly, but usually those are pretty close. So I didn't take into consideration the broader view. And I'm not saying good or bad, but that was my position. And so as I matured, I continue to work on not simply listening, but putting myself mentally in that position or in the space of whatever the other idea is, as much as possible. And I've observed that in other leaders that I've been around that I respect. I look at what they do, and I see that as a common thread. In fact, I could say that without exception. All of the really top people that I look at and go, hey, I can learn something from them. That is a characteristic, that is a skill that they have, and that's something that I value and has improved me as a leader. That's one. I don't know. Were you looking for more than one? I don't know how to take all this.
One is fine.
Okay.
That's fine. So Edsel, you're relatively new in a deputy division chief position. What is it that led you to pursue this position, and what skills or experience do you have that you think helps you the most in this position?
Okay. I would say why did I pursue this? And it's very similar to what Doug said. It's a greater impact to the people. I love when there's a culture, a team, marching to meet a mission. I've always said there's nothing more lethal than a well-synchronized team. And if I can make an impact and help in that synchronization of that team, that's what drives me. That's my why behind why I pursued what I pursued. I love the challenge. I love working with people, and the leadership aspect of this role is something I enjoy. And the second part of your question, what experiences and skills, do we need to have or are important for our job. I would say, first, as far as experience, definitely being a branch chief first. And there, I don't know if there's a rule book or a guidebook out there. Nobody puts it in their IDP. Hey, in the next 5 years, I want to be a deputy division chief. Or you go to school. I want to go to school to be a deputy division chief. But it's on experience. I've noticed this position is an organic type position. It's usually it's every division chief has their way of doing things and their method. So it does depend on that. But the experience, definitely a branch chief, able to lead folks. I would say one of the biggest benefits is if the person has the experience of leading folks with no supervisory authority. And I'll explain that in a minute. A deputy a division chief is a unique position. On paper, you're not the supervisor, but you are seen as a supervisor of those branch chiefs. You're doing their performances. You're providing input. You're sometimes working the feedback. So, and again, it depends on the system that the chief has. But leading the branch chief, sometimes you'll get branch chiefs that they may not necessarily view you as their supervisor, which is fine. You just need to provide that right balance of influential techniques. This is why I say experience leading folks without the supervisory authority goes a long way, because there's nothing harder to influence without authority. If you have mastered that, you've probably mastered 80% of leadership right there, or this position. And it's influential techniques, which is the second point I wanted to make. And I touched a little bit about this before. Influence is, and even as a branch chief, when you have authority, influence is, I would say, one of the biggest traits and fundamental skills that is needed in our role in leadership in general. I highly recommend the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It is knowing what's the why behind that other person, and what's the driving need of the other person, and understanding how both needs can align, your need and the other person's need. And it works 9 out of 10 times, being genuine, of course. Lastly, other skills that are definitely needed for this job, inclusiveness, that's important, alliance building, soft skills for people. And I've emphasized people, because people are your number one resources as a leader. You got to look out for these people. Men and women are sacrificing a lot for the overall mission. I mean, I see it every day. Folks going above their 40-hour workload, working for a cause that's greater than our understanding. I mean, it's our mission is a great deal, and leveraging the mission definition alone it helps. And we just got to look out for those people, for the people that are committing, giving their all to the mission.
Okay. You answered by one of my next questions, but so I'll ask a different one. Both of you have strengths and weaknesses. What are you? So I'll start with you. What is a weakness that you are working on, and what are you doing to work on that weakness?
Okay, so delegation is one that doesn't come naturally, especially, an engineer with technical background. You want to go and solve the world, and so delegation has been a difficult one for me. So what am I doing to improve that? And that's been something I feel that I've gotten a little better at it, and through time I've learned it. It's not something, to me at least, that I'm able to say, hey, that's my weakness, I'm gonna go change it, and I change it and I master it. I think I've gotten very efficient at it. my technique is training, and sometimes training, mostly for me, training has come in the form of reading books. So for instance, for delegation, which is one that my fundamental belief, if you got a stake on it, you're going to give it your all to resolve it, but at the same time, you got to give folks an opportunity to resolve those issues. That's growth opportunities, and I feel that, by me taking on that, I'm removing the ability for that individual to shine, so and that's part of looking out for people. And I didn't understand that until maybe about close to 2 years ago. I read a book that on delegation, and I started practicing that, and it's paid off. The book was a very simple a book, easy read. It kind of told you, hey, lay out all the specific tasks that you're responsible for, and what are some of these roles. Obviously there's some things that we as deputy division chiefs cannot delegate. Performance, for instance, is something that you cannot delegate. But other items that you can delegate, what would you feel comfortable if you get back a 70% good enough product? And that would be the first stab at delegation. And so to answer your question, Tommy, in conclusion, I think sitting down and identifying what are some things that you can tweak on, that you can improve. And that's something we always should be doing as leaders, is looking at, there's always a better way to do things. And grab a book, talk to the leaders within the directorate. We have a very good leadership support community, that we can openly talk to each other, and grab the phone and just say, hey, any good books you recommend on delegation? Or it could be influence, or it could be, or if you see a leader that's good at delegation, pick up the phone and just say, hey, any advice you have for me? We got to help each other out. We're in it together. Read a book and start practicing those concepts. So that's how I've been able to improve in some of those areas.
Thank you. Doug, do you have any weaknesses that you are working on?
Nope. No, I'm just kidding. Nope. Not here.
Hey, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to be calling you.
These weaknesses you speak of, I don't. Yes. So, well, I already mentioned one of them. Something that I don't. I tend to want to go into detail, and that isn't always possible, or frankly isn't always advisable. So I did go, and I have, like Edsel, there are books and there are courses that you can take, and I've done that, and when I go into these courses, I always my goal is to walk away, and I hope I don't offend the people that have these courses or write books, but if I can walk away with one thing, my goal is one thing. So I might read a book, and there's probably a gajillion things, and maybe I'm not processing, or maybe I don't even recognize it, or I just have bad memory, or whatever it happens. But I can walk away with one thing, that's a win for me. So I talk to people typically, or get advice from people that I respect, that I see that do a good job, and I tend to talk to the people, and then reflect. I think about it internally. That's my own method of doing it. I go seek somebody that I know is knowledgeable or is good at whatever it is that I'm not good at. When you say delegating, I'm going to be more. My mind is specific. Delegating technical stuff. As it turns out, I'm quite good at delegating business things. So, business, yep, over there. So,
Calling you.
Yeah, right. But delegating the technical is difficult for me to do that. So I actively have to do that. So I've asked. And then on the other side, the things that I don't have a great deal of, I'll say contracts and business. That isn't my background, and I am weak in that. So I seek out people that are good at that. And I really do. I ask them pointed questions, seemingly, and they may not even make sense to the person initially. But I listen to that, and I get that input, I get that advice, and then I really consider how that would be implemented. Again, walking away with one thing. If I can just change one thing, after a while, I'm gonna be better for it. So that's my personal approach. Maybe I should be looking for 3 things. That'd be 3 times as good. I don't know. But my experience is changing my habits, or people in general's habits. They don't change on dimes. You're not going to, generally speaking, I'm not going to make a wholesale change. I'm just looking for incremental things that I can do on a consistent basis that will get me to where I need to be. I mentioned another thing that I would need to improve on is just my business acumen. That's not my strength. So what do? Okay, I dive in there and I work with and I gather people around that are really good at that, and I'd ask for their advice. Not simply the answer to the question on the page, more of an approach. Like, how did you get good at what you're doing? Like, what things did you do? And then I look at books. How did philosophically, how did you get to this position? How did you understand that better? There's 2 different things. There's the immediate in your face on the page. This is the problem I have to face and answer today. But I'm always thinking in terms of how do I approach these kinds of problems, and how do I come out with positive results in these kinds of situations generally. So that's how I approach things. Good.
Okay. Thank you. So we have been working in a remote environment since March. I'll start with you, Doug. Have you seen any impact to us delivering on our commitments? Or are there any significant challenges that you've noticed as a result of us working remotely?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just came out of a meeting. We have a water cooler meeting, and the reason we have the water cooler meeting, and I'll explain what that is that one of the things that, at least this is my opinion and my observation, I don't want to say we've missed commitments. We're in the labs, take it very seriously. We go in and we hit our commitments. We have run into some logistic issues because of the social distancing restrictions. If you're in a lab, there's some logistics that you have to run into. So we go to multiple shifts. Does that impact people? Yes. And as you know, people is the number 1 resource. That if that starts impacting people and their health is impacted and their families are impacted, that concerns me. So yes, have we met our commitments? Yes. Has there been a larger effort that has been required? I believe so. But there's also some subtle things, and I'll get back to the water cooler. So there's some things that at least my observations, I think that the technology is fantastic. I didn't use Teams before this, or Zoom. I think that their introduction, I don't know when they were introduced. I wasn't really familiar with them, but they've come in big. And it's not all negative. There's a lot of pluses with this, but there's a couple of things that I think we're either missing, I believe that we're missing, and there's some negatives to go, and it's not necessarily obvious. It's over time that I've observed this. One, and there's different philosophies of management. I manage by walking around. I like to get out the labs. I like to go talk to people. I like to see what they're doing and interact with them in their natural environment. In the labs, that means I go to the labs. And that's not for everybody, but that's how I approach things. Not being able to do that is difficult for me because that's my natural inclination to do it. But on the other side, what I've noticed is what the benefit of walking around is that you have side conversations for 5 minutes that you don't have now. In other words, if I don't explicitly say I'm going to set up a meeting and have a half-hour conversation and we're not talking, generally speaking. And I think that there is value in the 5-minute hallway conversation. And when I point this out over a period of time, you may not see it in a week, or you may not see it in 2 weeks, but over months, you have this lack of input, you have this lack of information from how the people are feeling, what they're doing, what their problems are, or you get it all at one time and it's almost overload. You have this one meeting and then there's 50,000 problems. You're like, oh my God, what am I going to do there? So I believe that is maybe a subtle change that really over extended periods of time can have an impact. You don't have the personal touch. You don't have the feel. I personally am concerned that the folks don't think that I'm engaged with them or that I care what's going on. And so that's something that I've observed that I want to make sure that people do, and it's difficult to do that virtually. So that's one of the things. And the second thing is, especially early on, I was guilty of this. I don't know what the dynamic is. There's people, I'm sure, that study this and write a thesis on it. But I was working like a dog. I was working, if I was awake, I was working. And we have meeting from meeting to meeting to meeting because you can do it. I don't have to get up. I don't have to go to a different building. I can literally schedule the entire day of meetings and get stuff done. And then in between meetings, I'm going to work on this, and then I'm going to have a meeting, So there was a concern that I have, and in my observation, again, guilty as charged, of working simply because you can. It's hard to turn it off. I got in this mode of working, well over 12 hours a day and that was not healthy. And so my concern is I don't think I'm unique. I don't think I'm, alone here. And so my concern was that we are meeting our commitments, but we are burning our people out. And I don't want that. That's not good. That's a real big concern. So I don't know if you guys observed that or not. That was just my observation. Maybe that was unique to my division, but I doubt it.
So Doug, let's fast forward to the post-COVID-19 period. Let's say we're there today. What are your thoughts on telework? If you had to provide some thoughts on that today.
So that's a great question. I was just, again, in that water cooler meeting. We have a water cooler meeting just to get together to have the conversations that we would have had around the water cooler. Not that we have a water cooler, but I think you get the idea. This came up. This was not more than an hour and a half ago. And I will have to admit that my position or my attitude toward telework is changed. I will admit that I had a bias. Personally, I believe everybody has biases. It's just, I try to figure out what mine are and tell you about them. I had a bias. And I'm a labs guy. I believe in getting in the lab, rolling up your sleeves and working. So I had a bias, probably unfounded, and that I understood occasional telework, yes, and there are situational, okay, but in general, we get paid to do a job, and we're gonna do the job. Now, post COVID, post all of this, I can see a lot of benefits. I can see the work can get done, and I have a different perspective, and that bias has been changed dramatically, as a matter of fact. I can see going forward that telework would be potentially a part of the majority of the folks. Hopefully not 5 days a week. I do work in the labs, and there are some realities that we face. If you want to do lab work, you got to come in. But I could see it being, on the whole, a much bigger part of our of the mode that we do work, and some of that's a function of the tools. Teams, say what you will, I don't have any Microsoft stock. I think they do a good job. I think most people pick this up. You got a few buttons, so you can't screw it up, and it works Okay, yeah, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Can you complain about it? Knock yourself out. But I'd say that in general, it's a pretty good product, and these tools allow us to work virtually. I think more um, together as a team in ways that we couldn't perhaps before.
Right. So Edsel, what about any particular challenges that you're having? How are you guys doing with meeting your commitments? And what are your thoughts on telework going forward?
Sure. So, like Doug said, I mean, I think this really opened up my eyes on the whole telework thing, and our workforce, really resilient. We're still getting it done. I would say to me the impact. So we're abiding by the commitments, and we're figuring out a way to do it, and that's what makes us strong as a work unit. And we're delivering. The impact to me is the face to face. I'm a face to face guy. I like to read people's body language. So I obviously don't get that as much or as effective. I'll give you an example. If we're in a ELC meeting, and somebody is saying something, but I see other folks in the background maybe cringing, or or they have more to say, I'm gonna miss that, because I'm not, either people don't turn on their cameras because of bandwidth, or a different scenarios. So, but I still, but we kind of figured out a way, at least I did, kind of figure out a way to go around that. I just asked more questions. As a work society, I think this made us communicate more verbally, be more expressive, because I'm losing out on the body language, and sometimes that's not, reading people's body language. We're making assumptions. Sometimes those assumptions are inaccurate. So it kind of got me to ask more questions, to really understand, am I interpreting this correctly? Am I reading this correctly? It was a little bit harder, but I think we're making it work. And so, and meeting our commitments. Of course, every now and then, I mean, we got to be there. We'll have on-site requests. I mean, we can't build infrastructures from teleworking. We got to sometimes be there in place. And then the latter part of your question on, post COVID-19, how do I see this in our center? There's pros and cons, like everything. Like Doug, this has opened up my eyes on the teleworking. I think a balance would be good, but I do still believe that there is components where we have to be on site. We should be on site. We're building infrastructure, and we want to witness test procedures. We want to witness and establish these relationships with the contractors and the team. And there's only so much we can do virtually. I think there's that component that will give us that extra level of comfort. So I think, but at the same time, the pros behind the teleworking. I mean, keeping costs down on buildings, for example, or we're questioning needs for additional infrastructure. Things like that. Should we, invest in more infrastructure? Maybe we can figure out where we can do this concept of hoteling. These are all questions that need to be resolved, and I think that in the long term, we can figure out maybe having a balance, because I tell you, for instance, my commute, I live in Orlando. I do a 2-hour drive every day. I invested that time in I said I was gonna do exercise, or I was gonna invest in my health and well-being, and I have not. I've just worked more, So it's a double-edged sword, but at the end, it's beneficial one way or the other. So I think a healthy balance between the two post COVID-19, where we can be on site, but we could also introduce this flexibility of teleworking, I think would be beneficial.
Good. Okay, gentlemen, last question. Preparing the next generation of space engineers, what are some things that we need to do to get the generation after you guys prepared? That's what I'll start with you.
I think that for me, and putting my deputy hat on from a deputy division perspective, openness to initiatives. We call it ESP. We can call it any other name. The world keeps changing rapidly. We gotta be open, measuring what we're doing. Peter Trucker quotes, we can't manage what we don't measure. Measure what we're doing, measure the effectiveness and efficiency of what we're doing. And start adjusting, tweaking. If there's any way to do it better, let's do it better. I call that the project management mentality. So I would share that just being open to initiatives, have these initiatives constantly. I would highly encourage, I believe that our directorate is doing a great job in identifying these initiatives through the ESP initiative that we have and that we constantly seek. And I would highly encourage that, that's our directorate. We should probably recommend this to be a center-wide thing. Let each directorate identify. You don't have to call it, an ESP. You can call it something else. But bottom line is, we're dynamically changing all the time. Business models are created every day. And I've seen businesses lose their model because of change. So being openness and reacting, but also be proactive about it, to how we can prepare for the future and for these changes. I think that would help us go a long way for our next generation.
Right. Doug, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have two thoughts on that. They're both centered around knowledge transfer. So as you're going to develop new folks, and what I mean by that is not. Let me see first what it's not. It's not simply taking the old tools and telling you how to program in Fortran. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. I say Fortran because I get a lot of grief because I still use Fortran. So what I mean by that is, as engineers, scientists, business people, I'll speak about what I know about engineers and scientists. Getting a good mentor is super important. I view these pursuits almost as an apprenticeship. Maybe that's a dated idea, but that's how I view it. How to be a professional, how to approach them. I'm not talking about how to solve the differential equation like you learned in school. How to be a pro. How do you conduct yourself? How do you conduct a meeting? How do you approach a particular project? How do you address customers? Many of which maybe don't even know what they don't know. Well, there's many ways of doing it, and there's at least one or two good ones. So figuring out what those two good ones are from a qualified and experienced mentor, I speak for myself, key to my career. I can reach back and look back, and I can say there's been 3 or 4 people that were significant. Selecting a mentor is super key to me. That's what it was very influential in my career, and I've seen it be influential in other careers. That's the first aspect. Second aspect, you ask about what are we going to do to knowledge transfer, and this is more of a challenge to branch chiefs. This is a challenge to division chiefs and managers in general, or leaders in general, is in the selecting of those mentors. identifying this and codifying it and quantifying it and actually making it a part of the fabric of the organization, that when people come in new, or people come in that maybe they're not new, but they've never done something before, about pairing people up and giving them opportunities to really learn how to develop their skill and perfect their craft. And the hard decision, here's where the challenge comes in. The people that are really, really good, and maybe I'm wrong, but my observation, people that are really, really good tend to get loaded up with work. I'm no better. I'm guilty of that. Some hot job comes in, and it's super visible, important, and we got to get it done. I'm going to go to that same player every time. So there's two things that happen. You don't give opportunities to the other folks because you're always loading up that one. That's not good. So the challenge is don't do that. And two, those people that are highly loaded up are probably the perfect mentor. Not necessarily, but often is the case. So the challenge to management is to make the painful decision to not go with your gut, to replicate making that selection on past success. So the challenge is to everyone, you have to make that hard decision. It's a really difficult decision to make, but it's, in my opinion, that's the right decision. I've seen it been done. I've observed other leaders that do that, and I've tried to, as best as I can, not fall into the bad habit and to replicate that. So those are the two things. One, actively pursue mentors. Look around, see who do you want to be like? Who do you think has the most on the, or perhaps who does something well that you don't do well? I've done that before, and you go after that one aspect. And the other thing is on the leadership side, I challenge you to make the hard decisions. So those, I think that's two good points.
Great. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for your time today. And before I close this out, I'll give you an opportunity to make any closing remarks if you have any. If not, that's fine.
Just wanted to thank you again, Tommy, for doing this. And if anyone has any questions on this deputy division position and what to look out, the expectations, things like that, I mean, we have a very good core. We're open, and we can definitely share, our some of the skills and advice and tips for this position in the future.
Thank you, Edsel. Doug?
I trust that somehow that you'll leave our information or how to contact, and if you don't have that, my name is Doug Willard. Look it up. If you have any questions, if you want some advice, or sometimes the best thing is a direction. Hey, you want to know how to do something X, Y, Z? There's a good chance that I'm going to know, or I'll find somebody that's going to know, hey, this is the direction you need to go in. Any questions at all, or any concerns? Want that sort of direction? My door's open.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, see you.